not going to say much other than uh, this is going to be an interesting presentation because the students putting this together not only are from all over the state and never got physically together, so they had to sort of coordinate this virtually, but they also were on different teams in many cases. So we've got a hodgepodge, but I think you'll enjoy it. We've got Caroline and Mikey who were on middle school team last year, and then we have two Gavins and Leo, and you'll see them that were on elementary teams last year. So Caroline, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. So I'm just gonna share. Yeah, okay. So here we are. So if you don't know me already, my name is Carolina. I'm 12 years old, and I'm fortunate enough to be here talking about YMOS and the World Series of Birding. Wait, why isn't it working? Sorry, the keys. Oh, sorry about that. So first of all, I'm trying to introduce like what is YMOS. So it stands for Youth Maryland Ornithological Society, and it's basically a club for kids and teens who like birds. That's basically what it is. And it links youth from around the state, just around Maryland in general. It doesn't have to be in all one county. It's could be people from Montgomery, it could be people from Howard, or people from Anne Arundel like me. And our YMOS leaders. We have our beloved George Radcliffe and Dr. Wayne Bell, who are our mentors and coaches on all our birding trips, and we are very happy that they are here today. It offers monthly trips. I not every month, but almost all the months for no cost. They're completely free, and also they're a lot of fun. And it's also a chance for all the people in YMOS to compete in the World Series of Birding each year. And obviously, the World Series isn't our only trip. Other big trips include the March Birdathon, Cape May trip, and Western Short trip, but we're not here to talk about those right now. So let's just get right into the World Series. So it's actually the largest birding competition on East Coast because it spreads all over the state of New Jersey. I learned this actually very recently, but it's also the oldest competition in the US. This is older than the World Series of Baseball. I don't know, I learned that. It's held in New Jersey, as I've already said. It's based in Cape May. That's like the main headquarters, but it's all over the place, especially for Allstate. And it coincides with the peak shorebird migration. So a lot of people are mad about this because it's always placed on Mother's Day weekend. So everyone's mad about it, but there's a reason, because it coincides with the local shorebird migration for the best chances of local shorebirds. So why New Jersey? Of all the good birding places on the East Coast, why this place? What is so amazing about it? So it's the best birding spot on the East Coast. It just is. And I've been there, and it is. The southern tip is actually 20 miles out in the ocean off of Delaware. That makes for some great opportunities to get some good seabirds. And the southward migrating birds, they funnel down to the Cape May area. This is the first land they hit on the Atlantic Flyway. And for shorebirds, this is also right about the time. The reason why they're migrating right now is because this is when the horseshoe crabs are breeding and making the eggs. So imagine like all the shorebirds, they're coming in, they're exhausted, they're hungry, and they see all these horseshoe crabs and eggs, and they're like, oh my God, this is the best rest stop. And that's good for the birds, and it's good for us. So it's a three-part event. It's not just the one-day competition. There's several parts. It's not just a big competition. Like for the first 1 to 5 days, depending on what age you are and like what division you're in, it's scouting, which is basically like seeking out good birding spots across New Jersey for good birds, basically. And it's really important. It may not sound important at first glance, but it is, because without it, like basically you're just running around on a wild goose chase, pun intended, looking for random birds. And it's also especially important for a beginner because you're going to go on these spots in middle school and high school and carbon free. So you have to remember these spots so you can remember like what birds are here and how to get there, stuff like that. Creating an itinerary. So on the morning, the evening before the big day, which is the last day of scouting, your job is to create an itinerary. So based on all the information you collected at scouting, you're creating a specific schedule to go on for the big day that gets into the greatest variety of habitats. You don't just want to go to the coast for the seabirds. You're not going to get any birds. I mean, unless you're going to go on pelagic, because then you're going to get a lot of seabirds. But that's not going to happen. You can't just go to the marsh. You need a diverse variety of habitats for a diverse variety of birds. Gets to the most birds, obviously, and minimizes driving time. Like, there could be this one really good spot, but it takes 2 hours to drive through. That's very time consuming. You don't want to spend all your time driving. You want to spend all your time getting birds. Obviously, unless you're in carbon free, you have to get around by driving, but you have to choose the spots that minimize the driving time to the least possible amount. And it also gives the team at least 2 chances to find each bird. So for example, let's say American woodcock. That bird is a killer to find at the World Series. If you miss it, like for example, let's say at Belle Plaine, which is a real spot that we're going to be talking about a little bit later. Let's say you miss it at Belle Plaine. Hopefully, you have another spot on the itinerary that gives you sort of a second chance to find it later if you miss it. Now, finally, for the real important stuff, the big day. So depending on the division you're in, it will go from different time zones. So if you're in elementary school, you start at 5 and you end at 8. If you're middle, free to 10, high school, midnight to midnight. 24 hours. And carbon free, which is absolutely no car, 5 to 9. So the goal is to find as many species as they can in whatever time period they have. So when people think of birding or just bird watching, most known by common people, it's seeing the birds. But that's not true. It's also hearing them, identifying the calls. That counts too. And also part of the fun is collaborating with your team members and spotting and identifying the birds. Long story short, whoever has the most species by the end of the day wins. So carbon free, it's grades 6 to 12. So if you're in elementary school, we're sorry, but you can't do it this year. It's on bike and on foot. So for elementary, middle, and high, you get around to your places by car, right? Not for carbon free. You have to do it all by bike. However, if for some reason you need an emergency vehicle, you can. You're carrying all your gear with you, which can be a pain if you have some heavy scope. And expect to bike 35 to 45 miles on the big day. Here's the geographic range of New Jersey. So elementary only really goes to Cape May and some other county. Middle goes to 4 and high school goes to all of them. All of them, this entire state. So the team, usually 2 to 6 members. I went on one that had 5. 3 to 4 is what it typically is, but again, it can have less than that. They need to work together in advance. It helps if they already know each other. Obviously, they need to scout together, and they have to agree. Oh, there was a typo here. Now, must agree on identification. So here's the results from last year. So first place elementary got 145. First place middle got 190. Second place high school got 191. Carbon free got 100. I'm going to pass it to Gavin for now. You can have it.
Okay. Okay. Next page, please. Hi, my name is Gavin Tian. I am currently 10 years old and I live in Potomac, Maryland. I go to Cold Spring Elementary School, and one of my best hobbies is birding and bird photography. I currently have about 400 species of birds in my life list, And some of the favorite among them that I have photographed are the golden brown chlorophania, the common padu, and the long-tailed mannequin, all three from Costa Rica, the Atlantic puffin from Acadia National Park in Maine, the swallowtail kite from Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, the blue-throated or blue-cheeked barb, I'm not sure which, from China, and the razorbill from Cape Hatteras. Next page. I first started birding when I was 6 years old, and a bird landed on my deck. It started singing like crazy, and my dad found me a poster for the backyard birds. I studied it and found that the bird was a Carolina wren. I then made it my goal to find all of the birds on the poster. And my dad said, well, I'm sure you can find all of these birds if you really try in 10 or 20 years. It only took me a few months. And so my dad bought me a field guide to the birds of North America. It quickly became my favorite book, and I started reading through the pages, fantasizing at what birds I would see next. My dad had also bought me a spotting scope, and this is where I discovered my love of photography. Whenever I saw a bird, I would immediately snatch my dad's phone and take a photo through the scope. My dad got really tired of me taking his phone whenever I saw a bird, so he bought me a Lumix Panasonic camera, but sadly that camera broke when I tripped and it fell into the sand in Costa Rica. So my dad bought me a Nikon Coolpix P1000, which I still have today. But field guides and cameras were only gonna get me so far in my birding. So to help me learn more about birding, I joined the YMOS and participated in my first World Series of Birding. Next page, please. The World Series of Birding is an annual birding competition that takes place in Cape May, New Jersey. Why in Cape May? Well, it's because Cape May is like the funnel of migration on the East Coast. It also features all of the habitats from beaches to marshes to forests. We get to visit all of them, often resulting in more than 100 species of birds on the big day. Next page, please. A crucial skill that I picked up from the YMOS and the World Series of Birding was identifying birds by songs and calls. Something that really helped with this was when my mentor, George Radcliffe, got me a CD called Birding by Ear. I started forcing my parents to play the CD whenever we had a long drive, and I also started forcing my parents to quiz me on the birds by playing the songs and calls. The reason for this? Well, there's a short stretch of forest called Belle Plain where we drive at 1 mile per hour and stick our heads out of the car listening for birds. In this area, we usually get more than 20 species of birds purely by listening. Next page, please. Our elementary team this year were the YMOS Snap, Crackle, and Pop and Empire Strikes Back. And to the left is our mentor, George. During the World Series of Birding is a competition, but it's very friendly, and we often help each other out and point out birds to the other team. Next page. The World Series of Birding for the elementary team starts at 5 a.m. and ends at 8 p.m. And while the adults are stumbling around, groaning like zombies, us kids are bouncing around with excitement, so excited for the day ahead of us. Next page, please. There are many unique things about the World Series of Birding, and I'll include a few of them here. One of them is how we often miss very common species. Our example from this year was the great blue heron. On any other day, you could be anywhere and it could appear, and it could just appear. However, on the World Series of Birding, it seemed to have disappeared, and we never got it. However, the huge amount and variety of the different birds also makes up for it, including this bird imposter, the southern flying squirrel. Next page, please. Another interesting thing is how we often get birds in the most unique and unexpected places. An example of this is the Wetlands Institute. We knew it was a great spot because it had a huge marsh and a boardwalk. But as we discovered when we were in the parking lot, there were only half as many birds in the marsh than there was in the parking lot itself, including a Lincoln sparrow, white-crowned sparrow, green heron nesting, and many species of warblers, including magnolia warblers. Next page. After the big day on Saturday, after the day after the big day, we have a huge awards ceremony where we get to eat breakfast while listening to others teams' stories and experiences and sharing a few of our own. In the end, we take a huge group photo featuring all of the teams and the mentors. The World Series of Birding is a great competition and it helped me learn so much. I can't wait for the next one in 2025. And now I will hand it over to members of the Empire Strikes Back.
Okay, thank you, Gavin. That was very nice to you. But so now I'm gonna take you through like a normal day in the World Series of Birding. And this is the elementary team day, so it may be different for the middle school and high school. And then this is the Empire Strikes Back team. So that's Gavin, me, Leo, and then Ethan. And we saw 145 bird species, which is a lot. Yeah. Oh, Carolina, can you turn it, please? So, so during scouting, our first place that we went to was Jake's Landing, and it's a huge marsh with like a river running through it, and there was turns in the rivers and rails in the river and rails everywhere. And sometimes if you just clapped or coughed, the rails would call so loud. It was very impressive. Next, please. Yeah, so then the middle of scouting day one, salt marshes, beaches, and heron roosts. So we went to more beaches and salt marshes, and we found a piping plover in a flock of semi-palmated plovers, which was very, very, very cool. And as we were at our hotel, there was yellow crowned herons nesting in a big tree right outside, which was very cool. Next, please. And then at the end of the day, I saw my nemesis bird, the red-headed woodpecker. which was super cool. And I was really happy because I actually found it on a tree. And then we also went to this little like farm where there was a flooded field and there was shorebirds everywhere in that field, including a rare white-rumped sandpiper. And then we also went to like down to the ocean, and it was kind of impressive because there was a huge boardwalk that kind of went in, and I walked to the end of the boardwalk, and then a great black gull and herring gull flew right next to each other like that. So it looked really cool, and they were almost identical, except the great black gull was a tad bit bigger and had a black back, and the herring gull had a gray back. Next, please. So the beginning scouting day number 2 was my favorite because I really liked looking through my scope at birds far away, and we went to Coral Avenue Sea Watch. But it was a bit like stormy and wet, so there was some pretty big waves, as you can see in the picture of the black skimmers. But there was field sparrows singing on the dunes, and we got to meet Tom Reeds and stuff, which was really cool. And yeah, there was a lot of birds. Next, please. So the middle of scouting day 2, we went to Garrett Family Preserve. And there was a lot of cool breeding birds there that like you would only see in like fields and stuff and thickets. So we saw blue grosbeaks, prairie warblers. We did not see a yellow-breasted chat though, which was our main target, but we did see savanna sparrows. Next, please. And then at the end of scouting day 2 was probably our best warbler spot, which was the Cape May Bird Observatory. And there was so many warblers and migrants. And I actually saw my first magnolia warbler, which was because everybody else had seen them already at another place that we went to, but I couldn't find it because I'm actually colorblind slightly to green, so the warblers blended in very easily to the green, so it's hard for me to see them hopping around at the top of trees. But at the Cape May Bird Observatory, they're all really close, so you can see them very well, as you can see in the pictures. Next, please. And then at the beginning of the big day, we went to Belle Plaine State Forest and Jake's Landing. And Belle Plaine State Forest was really cool. We listened to whippoorwills and even heard an eastern screech owl, which was kind of unexpected. And then we rushed over to Jake's Landing and heard Virginia rails and clapper rails, as well as saw a white-rumped sandpiper, which was unexpected. But that means that we didn't have to go for our spot for them later in the day. Next, please. So at the beginning of the big day, we also went back to Belle Plaine State Forest to see all of our forest birds. And that was really cool because we saw because we were driving along and we're like, where are the turkeys? The turkeys are missing because we haven't seen any of the turkeys. And then I think Gavin yelled, turkey, turkey, there's a turkey. And he's like, oh, wait, there's also a bobcat. There's a bobcat. There's a bobcat. So, yeah, that was super cool, even if the bobcat ran off, because we got to see the turkeys. And there was also the forest birds, including a common yellow-billed cuckoo, and we also heard a Canada warbler. And then there was also the imposter southern flying squirrel, which ran across the road, and then we stopped and looked at it, and it was really cool. Next, please. Next, please. So after that, we went to the Coral Avenue Sea Watch, and it was so crazy because when we got there, there was a huge flock of scoters, and we're like, wait, there's 2 scoters there, and they have white wing patches. Those are white wing scoters. Those are super rare. So we got all 3 scoter species in like a second. And then and then somebody called a pelican, and I was like, where? And they're like, it's over that big wind turbine that was on the other side in Delaware. So I looked through the scope and there was a tiny speck that looked like a turkey vulture. But if you looked really close, you could see the bill, and it flew closer, so you could see it pretty well. And then when we were going, I also spotted a northern gannet that flew pretty close to the beach. Next, please. So after that, we went to Ocean Drive and our shorebird spots. So which was really cool. And when we were scouting Ocean Drive the day before, we had actually found 2 long-tailed ducks. And one of them was super rare. So 2 of them, that was like legendary. And that they stayed the next day was super cool and crazy. So we scoped those out pretty easily. Though it was very emotional when my scope fell into the water, but we got it out. And when we were driving back, we saw a mute swan with a baby, which was really cute. Next, please. And then finally, we went down to all of our shorebird spots, and we saw purple sandpipers, which we had scouted. But we couldn't walk all the way across to the beach to the jetty where they were hanging out. But we didn't have to do that because they flew towards us, which is nice. And then we also went back to which one was it? I forgot. Never mind. Next, please. So end of the scouting day, we kind of went north above the county almost to Ocean City and stuff. And we were like looking for any birds. And George was like, there's this one spot where there's a huge heron rookery. And we're like, we need to go there because we're super low on herons. We don't have either the night herons, we don't have tricolored little blue herons. And so we went there. But it was all the way in Ocean City. So we went there and there was a bajillion herons. There was both species of ibises, and since it was a rookery in the middle of a marsh, there was also trees, and those trees attracted migrants. So there was a rose-breasted grosbeak and Baltimore oriole just sitting in the trees, which was cool. And then when we went to the spot that was supposed to have piping plovers and black skimmers, but which we didn't see either of on the big day. But as we were leaving, I was like, because the whole day I kept looking for a loon, but only cormorants flew over. I was like, that one's smaller and has a longer neck. So I looked at it and I was like, that's a loon, loon. And everybody stopped and looked at the loon, and yeah, that was cool. Next, please. And then so the next day, we had learned that we had won, which is so cool because we had actually seen 145 species in a single day. It wasn't even a full day either. It was just 5 to 9. It's 5 to 8. Wait, I don't know. Now, okay, so now I'm gonna turn it on to Gavin.
All right, so my name is Gavin, and I was on the Empire Strikes Back team with Leo and Ethan. And the way that I kind of prepared for it was my mom gave me a binder. Oh, I'll take blur off.
It's okay. They can see that.
And so in this binder, there were like all the bird species we could get there and all the bird calls. So then I went on Larkwire and looked at what all these bird calls kind of sounded like. And I did that until the World Series. And then some of the highlights that we got at Jake's Landing included the red-headed woodpecker, the white-rumped sandpiper, which I had never gotten until the World Series, the Virginia rail, which most of them were clapper rails, I think. And overall, there were 37 species of birds at Jake's Landing. Next slide. And at the Wetlands Institute, there was some really good stuff there that the other Gavin explained a bunch of these. So we were like going around trying to find everything, and we already knew that there was a green heron nest there, so that basically guaranteed us a green heron. The magnolia warbler was in one of the bushes around the nesting site. And the common tern, there was one, I can't remember if it was the tern on the nest on an island, but there was definitely a tern on an island with a nest. Next slide. And then the Ocean City Welcome Center, which I believe Leo introduced, had a lot of cool herons and some other stuff like the Baltimore Oriole and rose-breasted grosbeak. And so we got yellow-crowned night herons. There was 2 of them, I think. There are a bunch of black-crowned night herons, little blue herons. The tricolored herons would occasionally fly in. The white ibises were also nesting there. And there were some other stuff as well. Next slide. Extra highlights. So the Canada Warbler, because I don't believe I got him until the World Series. The Summer Tanager, because I had the Scarlet Tanager, but I had always wanted to see the Summer Tanager. The Wild Turkey, because that took us ages to get. It was also with the Bobcat. And there were like a bunch of brant on a field. I can't remember if that was during scouting or the actual day. And then the flying squirrel was also there, which I believe the other Gavin spotted. And then we stopped for that. Next slide. And then, is this my part? Yeah, no, it's not my part.
So hi, thank you all. Thanks Leo and Gavin and other Gavin. So it's back to me again. You know who I am. So this is the carbon free team. I've never done this before because I'm only a 7th grader, but I can tell you some pretty cool stuff about it. So far we've covered a whole lot about elementary. Like we've scraped middle school. We haven't really talked about Allstate yet, but we haven't talked about carbon free. So that's what we're doing. So as I've talked about before, again, all the other teams use a car to get around, but these guys go on their bikes, and they also walk a lot because they're environmentally conscious while trying to spot the birds. Oh, no, not this again.
Okay, stop. Go.
Click it.
Oh, sorry, I'm free. Okay, so here's the route that they take. They usually start like somewhere around this area, and they go all over the place. That's 32 miles on bike, and the entire day, with pretty much only stopping to look at the birds. That's a lot. That's a lot of biking. So here's the competition itself. Here's the itinerary that they used and planned. And here was the team birding on the big day. They ended up, the team was named the Red Boss Bills. They ended up with 148 species, which is a youth carbon-free record for the World Series. And that's pretty much it for carbon-free. So for the next, we're gonna do some just World Series adventures and stories. So I'm going to get through a couple of my stories, and then the others can share some stories. So we already told a couple of stories in the other presentations, but this is when we're going to get deeper into them. And so when I was in elementary school, we were at the Meadows. It was the last spot of the day, and we were looking at some Bonaparte skulls when Gavin finally got, because he kept trying to repeatedly get pictures of Bonaparte skulls. But anyway, so he was excited by that. So we were looking at Bonaparte skulls, and Ryan just goes like, "Carlos Sandpiper in the reeds!" And we turn our binoculars and we see it, and we're like, "Oh my God!" Because if you don't know, so the curlew sandpiper is a vagrant from Europe, which means that it's supposed to be in Europe, but for some reason it was in Cape May, and everyone was going insane. It was crazy. It's probably either one of or the rarest bird I've gotten so far. So that was very cool. It was one of the biggest highlights of my birding career, and I just wanted to share that with you. The Scareport. So this was this year, and So only turn of events was to experience it. I have one of my teammates here today. He's going to talk in a little bit. So what happened? So we went to Woodbine Airport, which is like this old abandoned World War II airport that goes over like a huge field. And we wanted that field to get the early morning hornlarks because that was a bird that we needed to get on our list. So we arrived and there was a light on in like the building next to the abandoned one. And then there was a bell chiming and like there was the lighthouse was like shining on us. And then there was this creepy like Nickelodeon music playing that went like sort of like bum, 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 bum. And we're like, this is weird and there's no hornlark. Let's just get out of here. So we did. 10 minutes later, we're in bell playing. We got bell playing that morning was very successful. We got 2 barred owls and a chat. But we were listening to the barred owls when we heard like when there's like, okay, yeah, now we got to go back to the scareport because we did not get our hornlark. And I'm like, I don't want to go back. That place is creepy. But we did, and it hadn't really changed much. The music stopped, but other than that, it was basically the same. But we did get a hornlark, and bonus, we also got free whippoorwills, or it was either free or one. I think it was so they say they heard one, but I swear I heard a second one. But either way, we got a whippoorwill, which is a species that we needed, so that was nice. The turkey crossing the road, that was in elementary school. We needed a turkey. And there was just one crossing the road in bell playing with its chicks. And that was really nice. And we also saw like all 3 scoter species at Coral Avenue in 10 minutes. That was also very nice. So just if you have a story, you can just raise your hand digitally and I'm gonna call on you and you can share it. So does anyone have any story? Okay, Leah.
Lincoln sparrows in the spring are super rare, and I think it was like the first one that the elementary or some it was the first one that is like seen that season, and I think it was the only one seen that season, and it stayed for a couple of days. And so Ethan was pretty upset because he didn't see it and everybody else saw it in scouting. And then on the big day, 2 days later, which is pretty impressive for a migrant, somebody yelled, and we knew it was there, and there was like some guy looking for it, and somebody saw a sparrow hopping on the ground. So, and it turned, and it was the Lincoln sparrow because you could see the chest. It didn't have the black dot like a song sparrow. And everybody was screaming, and we kind of surrounded it. And then Gavin took 1 billion pictures and was lying on the ground. So, yeah. And then Ethan was very happy.
Sounds like a Lincoln Sparrow might have been was like the real celebrity. It's like Taylor Swift. Everyone wants pictures of her. I'm gonna go Mikey because he hasn't talked yet.
One really cool spot that we went to during the World Series was Cape May Bird Observatory, because it was late morning when we went there, and we got almost every single possible warbler there. Like it was crazy how many there were. There was just like absolutely everywhere. Even rose-breasted grosbeak was there, and there was around 10 species of warbler just in like the 5 to 8 trees there. And it was really cool to see like every single one. But it definitely hurt your neck a lot because you were looking up at the trees like basically the entire time. But yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. Gavin H.
So when we were, I forget where we were going. I think it was like a place. I think we may have gotten blue here and there, but we were going down like this road in the woods close to a body of water, and all of a sudden I see this big tree with no leaves, and then like a gigantic osprey on it. And then Leo and Ethan told me later that they that 20-second pause is 20-second pause, the biggest osprey I've ever seen.
Geez, I don't even think I've seen an osprey that big. Other Gavin, what's your story? I'm sorry.
So, what? Okay. So during the World Series of Birding, I don't really count lifers unless I get a photo of them. And during the World Series of Birding, we got like so many birds, like rare ones too, like Lincoln Sparrow. But like this year, like I only got one lifer. Whenever everybody else got a lifer, I was like, still not a lifer. Until we got the white-winged scoter, and that was the only lifer this year I got.
I'm a little surprised because I've seen a lot of white-winged scoters on like the St. Mary's and Cambridge trips. Leo.
Okay, so this one's kind of emotional. Drowning black-throated green warbler at the Cape May Bird Observatory. Very, very emotional. So I was at the blind because, like, why not? There was warblers everywhere, so why not see if any of them were bathing? And I saw this tiny yellow dot, like, fall, just like jump in the water, and all of a sudden, like, stuck. And like, I came closer, and I came out of the blind, and I looked, and it was like, that's a bird. That's a warbler. That's a black-throated green warbler. And it was stuck in the mud, and it kept sinking and sinking. So he tried to pull it up with his stick, but eventually its head went under, and we kind of gave up, which was very, 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 very emotional. And then Ryan saw it later. I think Carolina saw it too.
Yeah, I didn't see like the actual dying of the bird. I just saw the aftermath. And it was very sad. As soon as you start saying this is an emotional story, I'm like, I already know what you're talking about. We're all just like, what the heck happened here? Why is there a dead bird in the water? Anyone else? Okay, is that it? Okay. So here are just some pictures from the big day. So here's me right here. That's I can't really tell who that is. I think it's Carbon Free. Here's Carbon Free again. This is No Regrets at the Wetlands Institute. That's Turn of Events. That's the banquet when their Snap Crackle Pop is talking somewhat. That's Carbon Free. And this one is both No Regrets and Turn of Events here. That's me with the phone taking all the pictures of the horseshoe crabs. So yeah, we were looking at it like a bunch of like shorebirds and stuff like that. And obviously it's not the World Series of the bird, so I just picked some bird pictures. Most of these you've already seen, but this was my personal favorite. This was at the Rookery, which George recommended to us because he's like, hey, I heard that there's a big one. So we were the first ones to scout it out. And so every day, like at the scouting, and except for the day before the big day, at like scouting and big day, we always have dinner at Chipotle. So he asked us, would you recommend? So he asked me, would you recommend the Rookery to the elementary kids? And I said, yes. And here is a really good picture of a breeding great egret with eggs. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, Carolina and everybody, thank you so much. You can unshare. We'll come back and we can open it up for some questions. That would be awesome. Yeah, I echo Lynn's comment here. It's so nice, amazing to see all of you so excited about birding. And then Justine, who had to jump off, also said it was a great presentation. The future is in good hands. So I echo that. If anybody on here has any questions they'd like to present to our presenters or ask to our presenters, you can raise your hand or put it in the chat box. And I want to ask, I'd like to ask everybody to say what got you, we heard from Gavin how he got into birding with the birds on his back porch. What about everybody else? How did y'all get hooked into birding? Go ahead, Carolina.
So me, it was similar to Gavin, but a little bit different. So my grandpa, I call him Nono because he's Italian. He always liked birds, but he's not an avid birder, but he'd always liked them. And when they came to live with us in the pandemic, he would always get up early, as he always does, and he would with his mug of coffee, and he would stare at the birds. And one day I got up early because I didn't sleep well, because it was crazy times. COVID was at its height. And I came down and I said, no, what are you doing? And he said, watching the birds. And I'm like, I don't see any birds anywhere. And he's like, there's one right there. And I'm like, oh, I see it. And I'm like, what type of bird is that? And he's like, that's a white-breasted nuthatch. And for the next like as long as I can remember, like all during the pandemic, even when he wasn't in the pandemic, we would always share, like we would always get up early together and sit and watch the birds in the backyard. And then my dad, my very poor, unfortunate dad, didn't know what he was getting into. He was looking in the news and he said, oh, look, it's a bird club. How nice. And he's like, hey, Carolina, you would like this. And I'm like, okay. He's like, this is just going to be some nice afternoon walk. Little did he know I would have to get him up at 3 a.m., probably even earlier, like 2:30 for the World Series, and dragging him along. So it's basically his fault that I'm here presenting this to you. And that's how I got into birding.
Thank you. Go ahead, Leo.
So my birding story is a bit different. I didn't really have a spark bird or like started watching birds. So I've always liked animals for as long as I can remember. And so my parents saw this board game in Target, and it was called Wingspan. And they were like, hey, look at this board game. It looks so cool. And there was like a scissor-tailed flycatcher on the front of it. And I was like, that's a really pretty bird. And so we got it, and we didn't realize it was so complex and took 2 hours to play. But I got so interested in all the bird cards, I immediately read every single one, and then went to the library and got every single bird guide. Yeah, and I guess that's where it started. And then one day after school, I was walking home with my mom. And she was like, I signed you up for a meeting with the YMOS. And I was like, what's the YMOS? And she's like, the Youth Maryland Ornithological Society or something. And I was like, ornithological? And she was like, yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, and I think that's kind of where it started. And then I'm also in the Montgomery Bird Club. So I go on bird walks. Sometimes I see Ethan and Gavin, not Gavin H, the other Gavin. Yeah.
That's awesome. You know that the creator of Wingspan, Elizabeth Hargrave, I think lives in Montgomery County or lives near DC. She's a Marylander. I think she's in Silver Spring. She did a talk for us on how she created that game, which is a phenomenon. It has brought non-birders to birding, and it's brought it's brought birders to gaming. And we have game nights or game days at the museum. Mikey, go ahead. How did you get into birding?
Basically I started at like a real young age. I think I was like maybe 4 or 5, and my parents had this like small like book about like some common birds, and it had these little voice recordings of all their calls. And I remember sitting on my bed just listening to all the calls and being like, I want to go see all those birds. And so I've always just kind of liked the idea of birds, and I've gotten into it in the past 2 years, and it's been really fun.
That's great. My next question is, with the World Series of Birding, does the route change every year that you come up with, and how do you work together to come up with that kind of the itinerary? Go ahead, Carolina.
So it's basically the same spots, but as we talked about in the presentation, it can change, like based on like what you want and the best. You have to like sort of strategize like what would be best, and like estimate how many birds you can get for each spot, minimize driving time, stuff like that. So the route does change, but again, it's all the same spots. And how it changes each year, I don't know, it just does.
Leo, you have something to add?
Yeah, this year the elementary team took a pretty big gamble with our route. We didn't go to the Meadows or Higby Beach at all. And at the end of the day, we were like, well, we have pretty much all of our targets, and yet there's nowhere really to go, and we don't want to go down to the meadows in South Cape May because like Trump was there, so there was like a Trump rally, and there was super bad traffic. And that was so annoying, and he was the reason why we couldn't go to the meadows. And then so we were like, well, we might as well go up north to like Ocean City, which was actually like worth it because we added like 10 more species.
Richard, do you have a question for our group?
Not even sure how to say this. I'm so astounded at these people and what they've seen and what they've done and how they present this stuff. It's unbelievable. I take pictures myself. I shoot big birds, eagles, osprey out on the Susquehanna and things like that. Of course, I only take pictures, and so that's how I record what I see, as I have discs and discs full of files. But what you guys are seeing, it's such a young age. This may go on for another 50 years. How do each of you record what you see? Do you have diaries or books or scrapbooks or pictures? You guys need to keep track of this because in 50 years you may discover something. How do you keep track of what you see? That's the question.
Okay, who wants to go first? Leo, go ahead.
Well, I keep a life list, and I think most people here keep a life list. And that's just like, it's a huge checklist of like all the birds in Maryland or the United States. And each time you see a new bird, you just cross it off the list.
Gavin, go ahead.
I take a lot of photos. I don't even count. And I have a life list with files of all the photos of the birds I have, and I don't even count a bird as a lifer unless I have a photo of it.
Mikey?
I use a website called eBird by Cornell Labs, and it's really cool because it shows you like stats on what you've done, how many you spotted that month, and where you spotted it in like the regions. And so I use that to keep track of all the birds I found.
Carolina?
So as for me, I do keep a life list, but instead of using eBird, I use Google Docs, and I also have like a giant journal where I'll just randomly do bad, unrealistic drawings of the birds I see.
That is so excellent. Thank you.
You mentioned, this is the World Series of Birding. It's lucky that it happens in New Jersey, which is pretty close to Maryland. Do teams come from all over the world to compete in this event? Leo, go ahead, and then Carolina.
They do. It's usually the Eastern Coast, but there's usually like one or two people from like teams from other countries that are pretty far away. I think there was like a team from France this year. I don't know.
Carolina, do you have to add?
So basically the same thing as Leo said, but so yeah, it's mostly the East Coast, but there is some stuff from like the West Coast, the Midwest, and a couple other countries. Like, yeah, like he said, I'm pretty sure there was a team from France this year. And yeah, that basically the same.
And you mentioned earlier in the presentation that there were other bird competitions. Do you know any of those? Go ahead.
Oh, they're not exactly competitions, but we have other big trips. Like for example, the Western Shore trip. It's by Susquehanna. It's not the World Series, but it's like a competition in YMOS to basically get ready for the World Series. Cape May is not a competition at all, but it's at the same place where the World Series is. And it's just a really nice trip to just go and see the spots for yourself and get some good birds. Like one year I got a Wilson storm petrel and I was dying of excitement. And the birdathon it's my favorite thing that's not the World Series. So it's one of those things that you really gotta love in order to do because you're getting up at like 3 a.m. But that's the trip if you want all the good owls like great horned and barred, possibly a screech, short-eared. That if you want owls, you should go there. And last year's birdathon was absolutely crazy. Like, so we were birding at the mall parking lot looking for black-crowned night herons, which we were unfortunately unsuccessful. And the mall staff came and they said, "Okay, you're birders, right?" And we're like, "Yeah, of course we're birders." And they say, "There's an injured bird on the sidewalk." So we went, and it was actually a brown creeper, which was a bird that we needed. So basically what the birdathon is, before I continue the story, it's basically like trying to get as many birds as a team as possible to make funny for the World Series. But anyway, what happened was, so it was a brown creeper, which was a bird we needed, but it was still alive. So we got it. So it ran into the mall window, and luckily we put it in a shoebox and we were able to revive it and it flew away. And also in the marsh in Elliott's Island, like the sky was just rising. So the sky was really pretty. And we got like 9 American bitterns calling at the same time. Like that was absolutely crazy. But that's it for me.
Riley, go ahead.
What did you guys see at Cape May? Sorry, I wasn't able to make it.
This year?
Yes.
So pretty much the same stuff as we always do. Like we got cormorants, Jaegers. Wasn't that exciting, but we did see some good stuff. Oh yeah, forgot. There were like 4 Merlins that we got.
Cool.
All right, and I'm going to ask this question because this is the second time I've heard this term, the nemesis bird. What is a nemesis bird? Please explain. Leo, go ahead.
A nemesis bird is a bird that you really, really like. You keep trying to go to the place. You check the rare bird alert and it's there. You go to the place and it's not there. So you leave, and 5 seconds later, somebody reports it. You do it, and like you go to the habitat, you go through multiple times, it's not there. So mine is the American bittern. And I think the biggest sting from that was actually the birdathon. My sister had a dance contest, so I couldn't go the first day. That was the day that they saw 8 American bitterns. So I was so upset because I got to go the second, but I didn't see the American bitterns. So the whole time, the second day, I was checking every single marsh, and there was none. There was none, even though there was still Wilson snipe, which was really cool.
Follow-up question: your nemesis bird? Does it become your favorite bird? And if not, what is your favorite bird?
I mean, it doesn't really become your favorite bird, except for the 5 seconds of absolute pure joy that you see that you get when you see it. Because like I think all birds are equal, except for maybe brown-headed cowbirds, which are the worst, and golden-winged warblers, which I dream of. Yeah.
Does anybody else want to share their nemesis and favorite birds? Caroline.
So my nemesis bird is the Nashville warbler. It just is like I got like a tiny glimpse of it at the Cape May Observatory on the big day, but that's it. And one big example of that, well, I think it was at the Dorchester trip. There was like one in the bush, and everyone was like, I could see it, it's flitting around the tree. And I'm like, where? And they're like, oh yeah, it's gone now. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I've had more experiences like that, but that's the most prominent one. And my favorite bird, it's really hard. I like vultures a lot. I don't know why, I just do. And I am secretly a believer that the ivory-billed woodpecker's still alive. I know a lot of people think it isn't, but if it is, that's my favorite bird.
All right, Gavin, what is your nemesis and your favorite bird?
My nemesis is like both screech owl. Once it was like reported just the day before I went to go see it, and also the white rum sandpiper. Like it's supposed to be so common, but I just can't get it. Even during the World Series of Birding, everybody saw at least two, but I didn't get a single one. And I already stay my favorite birds.
All right, and Mikey, what is your favorite and your nemesis?
I say my nemesis bird. Although it's not around here, it's the dusky grouse. Because I've been trying to find the bird for 3 years. Every summer I go to Colorado, and like I've been looking for it, like for the 2 weeks I'm there for like 3 years straight, and have not found a single one. I've gone to like reportings of it, I just cannot find it, and it's like I don't know why. And then my favorite bird is American kestrel. Yep.
Those are all great. Any other questions for our team, our very capable team that represents Maryland very well in the World Series of birding this past year, and I hope that you continue doing it. The joy that comes through your presentation and your storytelling about your birding is contagious, and I really appreciate you taking the time and effort to share with us this evening. If anybody else have anything to say? George, would you like to comment about your team?
I think they speak for themselves. I learn more from them than they do from me, I can guarantee you, and you can tell that by listening to them. They're an impressive bunch.
And Dr. Bell, would you like to say a few words?
He may have gotten off, I don't know.
You're on mute, Wayne, you're on mute.
Okay.
I'm sorry. We've heard a lot in these presentations about how parents have catalyzed, if you will, the interest in birding and supported it. But the reality is also true that we wouldn't have a YMOS if it weren't for the parents. George and I don't drive around picking up kids, taking them to various spots. Parents carpool or bring their youngsters to our meeting places. Some of them actually stay for the day, drive around with their kids, and a few, not just a couple, but a few have actually become birders themselves. Kudos to them as well as to the youngsters.
Well said.
All right. Well, thank you. Oh, Gavin, go ahead.
So I never got the chance to say how I got into birding. So one day when I was 5, I was looking at my bird feeder outside on my porch through the window, and that's when I saw a northern cardinal and a house sparrow. And I had this bird book laying around, and that's when I got into birds. But when I was 8 and I went to my grandparents' house, so I asked to look at the Cornell Lab cameras, and I went to the condor cameras, and there was a condor egg. And 5 minutes later, I was still watching it, and one of the adults comes in and sits on it, and then when it stands back up, there's a baby there, and that's how I like got really, really into it.
That's awesome. Well, thank you all for this wonderful presentation from Must Learn Thursday for the Natural History Society of Maryland. I really want y'all to come and visit the museum. We have birds, but they're in they're in drawers. They're not the alive ones, but we could probably do a behind the scenes tour of our bird collections with the young YMOS group if they would be interested in coming down to the museum and hanging out. We also have eggs from the 1800s as well, so that could be kind of cool to look at. Y'all are amazing and inspirational, and you make me want to go out and bird more and more because I want to grow up and be just like you. So keep out, everybody stay well, stay curious, stay outside, keep looking for those birds, and I hope that you can come see us and we can all go birding together. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.